I have a rule. Never feel anything for anyone sitting across that table from you. It's the first thing they don't teach you in law school, but should. Because the moment you feel something, you lose. And I have never lost. Not once. Not in 6 years. Until her. My name is Riya Sharma. Senior Associate at Mehta & Associates, the kind of law firm where the carpets cost more than most people's cars and everyone walks like they're being watched. I bill 80 hours a week. I wear blazers to breakfast. My planner has a planner. I own 4 copies of the same navy blazer because decision fatigue is real, and I refuse to let my wardrobe be the thing that slows me down. I am, by every measurable standard, completely and totally in control of my life. Or I was. Before case number 47. Her name is Zara Khan, 28 years old. Charged with wire fraud, money laundering, and what the prosecution's case file cheerfully described as orchestrated financial deception across 3 countries. She walked into my office on a Thursday morning like she owned the building, like the building was honestly a little beneath her. Leather jacket. No expression. Eyes that looked at you like they were already 3 steps ahead of wherever you thought this was going. My firm doesn't represent criminals. We represent corporations. Blue-chip clients, quarterly earnings, the kind of people who commit crimes in PowerPoint format. But Zara's case had certain powerful people deeply nervous, and powerful people pay very well to stay calm. So here I was, sitting across from someone the prosecution had described as dangerous, thinking she looked less like a criminal and more like someone who had simply decided the rules were not written for her. She sat down without being invited, crossed one leg over the other, looked around my office like she was assessing what to take. And then she looked at me. "You're younger than I expected," she said. I didn't blink. "You're exactly what I expected." She smiled. Not warmly. More like she'd filed that away somewhere useful. That should have been the end of it. Client. Case. Professional boundary firmly in place. Goodbye. Except Zara Khan didn't behave like a client.
Enjoying the story? Subscribe now and never miss a single word.
She showed up to our second meeting 20 minutes late with coffee for herself and not for me. When I pointed out that punctuality was a basic courtesy she might consider extending to the person keeping her out of prison, she looked at me and said, "You seem like someone who already has coffee." She wasn't wrong. I had 2 empty cups on my desk. I hated that she wasn't wrong. She never answered a question directly. Every time I asked something simple, like "Where were you on the night of March 14th?" she'd pause, tilt her head exactly 1 degree to the left, and respond to a completely different question in a way that somehow still answered mine. It was the most professionally infuriating communication style I had ever encountered in 6 years of practicing law. I have deposed Fortune 500 CEOs. I have cross-examined people who lie for a living. None of them made me feel like I was the one being questioned. By week 2, I had started looking forward to our meetings in a way I refused to examine too closely. I told myself it was the case. Complex, high stakes, genuinely interesting legal territory. That was it. The case was interesting. Kiran, my paralegal, did not believe this for a single second. She noticed, of course. Zara noticed everything. It was, objectively, her most unsettling quality. "You wore that same blazer the first day we met," she said one evening while I was reviewing her financial records across the conference table. I didn't look up. "It's a different blazer. Same color. I like navy." Silence. Then, very quietly, I know. I looked up. She was already looking somewhere else. My paralegal Kiran pulled me aside the following morning with the expression of someone who has been physically restraining a sentence for 48 hours. "She asked about you," Kiran said. "Zara. Asked how long you've been at the firm. Asked if you always work this late. She's a client. She's doing her research. That's what intelligent people do." Kiran opened her mouth. "Don't," I said. She didn't. But the look she gave me said everything she wasn't legally permitted to say out loud. Before I tell you about the night everything shifted, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe right now, because what happened next is the part 1 have never told anyone. And I need witnesses. Lawyer instinct. Trial prep was brutal. 16-hour days. Evidence binders stacked to the ceiling. Cold conference room, bad lighting, the specific exhaustion that comes from holding someone else's future in your hands while running on 3 hours of sleep, and professional stubbornness. Zara sat across from me every evening and worked through the case timeline with a precision that made the prosecution's file look like a rough first draft. The file said reckless, impulsive, someone who acted without thinking through consequences. She was none of those things. She remembered every date, every transaction, every name, in the order they happened, with the full context they happened in. Not like someone rehearsing. Like someone who had built something with her own hands and knew every corner and every crack of it. Whatever she had actually done, she had done it with her entire mind fully engaged. That was a more complicated thought than I needed to be having at 11:30 on a Tuesday. One night, it was close to midnight. The rest of the team had gone home. I was reading the same page of a deposition transcript for what was probably the 5th time and genuinely not absorbing a single word of it. I didn't hear her move. But suddenly, there was a cup of tea on my side of the table. I looked up. Zara was already back in her chair, eyes on her own documents, like nothing had happened. "You've read that page too many times," she said, without looking at me. "You're not reading anymore. You're just looking at it." I looked at the tea, then at her. "How do you know how many times I've read a page?" She didn't answer. I looked at the tea again. No sugar. Ginger. Exactly how I take it. I had never mentioned this to her once. Not once. I drank the tea. I did not ask the question. Some answers you're not ready to sit with yet. The prosecution's star witness was a man named Desai. Polished, well-rehearsed, visibly confident that his testimony alone was enough to bury her. He had this particular smile when he sat down on the stand. The smile of someone who believes they've already won before anything has started. I spent 3 days on my cross-examination. When the day came, I took that smile apart piece by piece in under 40 minutes. Afterward, I looked over at Zara at the defense table, the way you always look at your client after a strong cross, just to see the relief, the exhale, the gratitude. She was already looking at me. No relief. No surprise. Just that steady, quiet certainty. Like she had known exactly how it would go. Like the outcome had never once been in question for her, not from the day she walked into my office and sat down without being invited. Something happened in my chest that I had absolutely no legal terminology for. I told myself it was professional satisfaction. Kieran's face when I returned to the table suggested she had a different and more accurate theory.
Enjoying the story? Subscribe now and never miss a single word.
The verdict came on a Friday afternoon. Not guilty on all primary charges. 2 minor counts settled with financial penalties. She was walking out free. I should have felt the clean, precise satisfaction of a case well won. The thing that makes all the late nights worth it. I felt something much less categorizable. We stood outside the courthouse. November. The sharp cold that gets under your coat immediately. My team was celebrating on the steps behind us. Zara stood slightly apart from the noise, hands in her jacket pockets, watching the city with the same expression she used for everything. Calm. Thinking. Already somewhere else in her head. I walked over. I did not make a conscious decision to walk over. My feet simply went. "Congratulations," I said. Composed. Professional. Perfectly calibrated. She looked at me sideways. "You say that like the alternative ever occurred to you." "I don't entertain alternatives once I've taken a case." "That's not what I mean." A pause. "You doubted yourself." "Not the case." "Yourself." I said nothing. Because she was, with absolutely no right to be, completely correct. "You shouldn't," she said. Quiet. Final. Like a verdict of her own. I should have walked back to my team right then. "The case is closed," I said instead. "It is. So you're not my client anymore." She turned to look at me then. Fully. The way she looked at everything she was actually paying attention to. "No," she said. "I'm not." The air between us had the specific weight of something neither of us was saying out loud. We were both completely aware of it. Neither of us was going to be the first to name it. That was mutually understood without discussion. "There's a cafe on Linking Road," I said, very carefully addressing the traffic in front of me and not her. "Good tea." Quiet. "I go there Saturday mornings." Silence. I didn't invite you, I added. I know, she said. I walked back to my team. Hands perfectly steady. Face completely composed. Internally running a full audit of every professional boundary I had ever constructed for myself. Saturday. The cafe. I arrived first, which I always do. Ordered my tea. Opened a book. Read approximately 0 words of it for 25 minutes. She walked in at 9 and 2 minutes. Leather jacket. No expression. She sat down across from me like there was nowhere else in the room she was ever going to sit. Like this table, this chair, this particular angle of morning light had been quietly arranged for exactly this. You're going to ask me if I actually did it, she said. I held my unread book for exactly 1 more second. Then I looked at her. I was your lawyer. Whether you did it was never my question to answer. Former lawyer. Former lawyer, I agreed. A beat. The city outside being exactly what it always is. Did you? I asked. She looked at me for a long, unhurried moment. And then she did something I had not seen her do once, not through any meeting, any late night, any courtroom appearance. She smiled. Not the assessing one. Not the filed away one. Something quieter than both of those. Something that looked like it had a very short list of people it was ever shown to. Does it change anything? She asked. And sitting there with cold tea and an unread book and the whole Saturday completely still around us, I understood that it didn't. That somewhere between midnight tea I hadn't asked for and a look across a courtroom on a Friday afternoon and whatever this specific silence felt like, the answer had simply stopped being the point. No, I said. She nodded once. The way she did when something confirmed what she already knew. 3 weeks later, she texted me. No greeting. Just a time and the name of a restaurant I had never heard of. Kiran, who had developed what I can only describe as a deeply personal investment in my life, looked it up before I could stop her. 3-month waiting list, Kiran announced. You have a date. I have dinner plans. With a woman who memorized how you take your tea without being told. I closed my laptop. Kiran. Just noting facts. Paralegal. It's literally my entire job. The restaurant was tucked into a lane in Bandra I had walked past 100 times without seeing it. She was already there, which was new. Corner table. Back to the wall. Facing the door. Old habit, I thought. She ordered for both of us without showing me the menu, and everything that arrived was something I would have chosen myself. I did not ask how she knew. I was beginning to understand that with Zara, some things you simply don't ask. Not because she won't answer, but because the knowing is already its own answer. We talked for 2 hours. Or she listened and I talked, which with her felt like the same thing. I told her about the case that almost broke me 3 years ago. The client I didn't win for. She didn't offer comfort or advice or any of the things people usually reach for. She just listened with that complete, uninterrupted attention of hers, like what I was saying deserved to be heard properly before anything else. Nobody had ever made me feel quite so listened to in my entire adult life. When we stepped outside, the lane was quieter than the city had any right to be. The kind of quiet that feels deliberate. A single street lamp doing its best. She stopped walking before I did, and I turned to find her already looking at me with that expression I had spent months learning to read and still hadn't fully decoded. What? I asked. Nothing. But she didn't look away. Zara. You talk about the law, she said slowly, like it's the thing that holds you together. But I think it's actually what you hide inside. The sentence landed somewhere I wasn't prepared for. I opened my mouth to argue it, the way I argue everything, instinctively and immediately. She stepped closer. Not dramatically. Not quickly. Just closer. The way she did everything. With complete intention and zero wasted motion. You're about to tell me I'm wrong, she said quietly. You don't know that. I know you, she said. Simple. Certain. Like a fact that had always been true and was only just being said out loud. And I didn't argue. For the first time in 6 years of arguing for a living, I had nothing. The case rested. The courtroom was empty. It was just her voice and the quiet lane and the particular way she was looking at me like I was something worth knowing. She kissed me the way she did everything else, without announcement, without hesitation, with her whole attention on it. One hand came up to my jaw, steadying, the way you hold something you don't want to drop. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't the kind of kiss that happens in films with swelling music and convenient lighting. It was quieter than that, more serious. The kind that doesn't ask permission because it already knows the answer. When she pulled back, she didn't go far. "Still think you know what you expected?" she asked. A low murmur. The ghost of that smile. My brain, which had spent 6 years being extremely reliable, had temporarily gone completely offline. "No, I managed." "Good," she said, and stepped back, hands returning to her jacket pockets like nothing seismic had just occurred. I stood there in a Bandra lane at 10:30 on a Thursday night, with 6 years of professional composure in absolute ruins around me, and thought, this is what losing feels like. It felt nothing like I expected. I still wear navy blazers. I still bill too many hours. My planner still has a planner. But there is someone now who sits across from me on Saturday mornings and already knows how I take my tea. Who listens like listening is something you do with your whole self. Who kissed me in a quiet lane and then put her hands back in her pockets like she'd simply said something that needed to be said. I built an entire career on being certain before I commit to anything. I have absolutely no certainty about where this goes. And for the first time in 6 years, I don't need it. If you've ever been completely taken apart by the last person you were supposed to feel anything for, hit that like and subscribe. Because 6 years of law school, a perfect case record, and 4 identical navy blazers will not protect you. I am living proof of that. And honestly, case closed. I rest.